Hello, folks. It's Michael with the Reason X podcast, and here with my co-host
Melanie in Minnesota.
Right. So, Michael in the non-alliterative Houston and the non-alliterative Texas. So, hope y'all are doing well today. We got a good show for you. Today, we're going to be talking to Joe Camp. Some of y'all know, some of y'all might, but everyone should. We're going to get into what we can learn from animals and dogs and horses and other things. Just, it shows the importance of nature, how when we're not in it, then we're not really being a human being. We need to be in nature and involved in it. People have therapy with dogs and therapy with horses for a reason. It helps for a reason. More so than like a teddy bear or like computer. I think people don't go to like there's heroes and horses. It's not heroes and computers where you go and play a bunch of video games to like recover from trauma. It's horses for a reason. And then they get us out in nature. So it's part of the whole holistic thing of being a full developed person. So we have someone who knows a lot about horses and will help people see what they're really like, how to be true to their nature, how valuable they are, how much we can learn from them. So you have anything to say, Melanie?
Oh, just excited to hear what Joe has to tell us. I mean, it's just going to be so informational and exciting to hear his process, how he got to where he is today. Can't wait to hear his story.
Yeah. So Joe,
and just to add to that, Joe Camp is also the creator, writer, director, innovator of Benji, the Benji movie. So very exciting to hopefully talk about that if we can today as well.
So Joe, could you tell folks about yourself, please?
Oh my goodness! How much time you got?
I got all day.
I don't know. I think the easiest thing to say that I'm a very passionate person.
Mm-hmm.
Have been blessed with a lot of success in what we've done, but I think it all started back with my dad when I was a junior in high school, and I suddenly realized that I was only 1 year away from having to make a selection and go somewhere to college and to grow up.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, how the devil are you supposed to figure out what you want to do and what way to go so you know what to study? And he said something that was really not of the times, and I've never forgotten it. He said, do what you would do if you didn't have to earn any money at it whatsoever. You'll always be happy in your work, and your work will always be great, because to do that, you're doing something that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And I can honestly say that I have spent the bulk of my life doing just that.
That's great.
And I have deduced from that passion is not just a subjective thing that is been planted in your heart, and I believe by God. It is something that drives you through the process, because I hear all the time today people talking about kids that they don't want to work, or they come up against an obstacle and they just turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
They don't drive through it. And one of the things that I'm preaching a lot on right now is do what you're passionate about, whatever it is. Not being a beach bum, obviously, but do what you're passionate about, because that will drive you through. That will give you the juice to never quit.
Yeah.
And I can truly say that my professional life started in an advertising agency, learning the ropes of marketing and so forth. And the reason for all of that, I found out when I decided, when I wanted to go to college. And, my dad had given me this speech, and so I decided I want to go to UCLA because that's where film. That's one of the best film schools in the country, and so that's what I thought I needed to do, because I had, from about the third grade on, from the day I sat in the theater in Little Rock, Arkansas, and watched Song of the South, and the happy tears that followed it. From that point on, I knew what I wanted to do.
Huh, cool.
And or at least thought I did. And by the time I was 16, I knew I did. But I was 34 before I actually was doing it. And so it was a long, long haul. And when I finally did apply to UCLA, I was turned down. That was one of the few really serious points in my life where I thought life was over as I knew it.
Yeah, wow.
If I can't follow that passion, what am I? And what it was, as it turns out, there's another phrase that somebody used recently. It was that what God allows in His providence often seems to contradict His purpose. And I learned that not too long ago. But that's what was happening to me all the way through, because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to do what I thought I was ready to do, simply because I had the passion and the drive to do it. And so God says, you don't need to go to UCLA and learn film. You'll work that out. What you need to do is go to Ole Miss and learn marketing and advertising, because you're going to need it when Los Angeles and Hollywood turns down your movie. And unfortunately, he didn't. He doesn't feel obligated to let you know all of that at the time. He just said, "No, you're not going to UCLA." and yes, everybody in Hollywood turned it down when the time came. The movie was finished, and we took a finished product out there, the original Benji, and everybody out there, including Disney, turned it down.
Yeah, wow.
And we had one choice, basically, is either throw it in the trash or figure it out. And so we went back and raised more money, formed a distribution company about which we knew nothing,
wow.
And spent the year of 1974, believe it or not, working out the flaws in the marketing program, which I said, I don't worry about that. I got that down. I got that pat, and every decision I was making was wrong. And so we plowed our way through, that, and the picture was released across the nation, not at one time, but piecemeal, in 1975, and became the number 3 picture of the year.
Cool. Nice.
From our own distribution company in Dallas. And, everybody thought it was pretty much an overnight success. But it was years and years. It goes, you can track it all the way back to, like I said, the 3rd grade.
Yeah, true.
Little Rock, Arkansas. And then when the process actually got started, it was like, trying to work your way through a minefield of just, slammed doors and bad decisions and lack of knowledge and one thing and another. And I learned for the first time, I know somebody else who said recently, I heard this, and said the most successful people are the ones who say no a lot. And you can track success by how many times they say no, basically. And understood that way back then, because what we were trying to do was brand new. There had never been a movie in which the dog was the three-dimensional character, in which the people were the props, and where the story was going to be told through the eyes of the dog without the dog ever issuing one word in English.
Oh, yeah.
And so the dog was literally going to have to act on the screen. You're going to have to feel that dog, because that's where your story goes through. And yet today, I can ask fans of that movie what they liked about it so much, and nobody has a clue. They don't stop to think about what's really happening to them. But to get it on the screen, it was a major problem. It was I mean, you think that the dog has got to show, he's got to be happy, he's got to be sad, he's got to act like he's lost his last friend, he's got to be up, and his eyes have got to tell you what he's doing next, and why he's so upset or not upset or whatever's going on. And so there's only two ways I know to do that, and one of them is to do what an actor would do, and that is replace the emotion with a feeling by thinking of, somebody once told me that, I said, you really look good in that scene, and you did this and that. I said, what were you thinking? And he said, well, I was remembering as a kid when we lived out on the farm, and we had a outhouse, and we had an outdoor shower, and in the wintertime I had to go out and take a shower. I can't tell you how much I hated that, and it scared me to death, and I would cry. And he said, and that's what I thought about.
Huh? Yeah.
And that's what got me to cry. Well, so you have to replace that emotion within a dog so that it's very real, or you got to eliminate the parts of the dog that aren't acting true. And by that I mean, there was a Lassie movie I saw once. Lassie there was a big wide shot, and Lassie was under this tree, and there was a bobcat up in the tree, and Lassie didn't know the bobcat was there. And at some point, the bobcat went, and Lassie turned and looked up at the tree. That's all he did, was turn and look up at the tree.
Yeah.
And I said, no, a dog with a bobcat on top of him up there, up in the tree, everything in his body would have turned. He would have spun around and said, what the heck is that? And be out of there. And so that was, my second lesson is, so if you can't get that to happen, and you're not going to hurt the dog, you're not going to scare the dog so bad that that he actually does that. So what do? You push that camera in and get a close-up, and you get that head turn really sharp and really fast, and the rest of the body, the tail's wagging like crazy, and you don't care because you don't see it. And we had we shot the opening shot in the original Benji 74 times.
Wow.
We shot it every week for the entire course of the production schedule.
Wow.
We'd go back and do it again. And every time it was my fault. I mean, the first movie I'd ever made, the first movie almost everybody on the set had ever been in, had ever worked on. And the only people that had any experience at all was Frank N., the dog trainer, and his wife, Juanita. And everybody else was basically Dallas crew who had, we'd all done, commercials and industrial films and things like that. But nobody had, experience on a real movie. And so the house, for any of y'all who have seen that movie, that opening shot is an old, beat-up, gray, haunted-looking house that's got vines crawling all over it, and yard that's unkempt and whatnot. And that's the first shot in the movie, and then the camera starts moving and dollies diagonally all the way across the yard, getting in closer and closer, and then tilting up and finally zooming to a window on the side of the house. one pane of which is broken out. And right when the camera stops, the first beat of music hits, is when Benji pops his head through that window, and it's morning, and the birds have been tweeting, and it's supposed to feel like morning. And so when he pops his head through that window, he's got to sniff the morning air like a dog does, and sneeze and take off for his morning walk. And I desperately wanted, that's the first time you see Benji, and I wanted it to be a real dog doing a morning just like a real dog does, not a trick dog doing a movie. And so the very first time we shot it was in the, at sunup, and the sun was coming up over the horizon. The problem turned out to be that the house faced east. So the minute the sun came up over the horizon, the sun flooded the front of the house. Benji was perfect. I mean, he'd been in there asleep for who knows how long. It was the morning. He, hadn't worked since the day before, and he was awakened just before it was time for him to pop his head through that window, and he looked like, it was perfect. But the house looked like sundown. When we got the film back and looked at it, I said, "Oh my God!" I hadn't paid any attention to what the front of the house looked like when we were doing this because it was so important. And it's all one camera move, all the way up. There's no cuts, and so all of that had to be really perfect. Everything was, except the look of the house and the front of the house, and it looked like the middle of the late afternoon or something, and so it destroyed the whole thing. So we did it this way, and we did it that way, and some other way. And the problem, the second time we did it, I finally figured out that the lighting needed to be in the evening, so that the sun was on the back side of the house, and the front of the house had that blue feeling as everything was backlit, and so there was it all felt like morning. And the problem, the first time we did that, is that Benji stuck his head through the window and his tongue was hanging out a foot. He'd been working all day long in the hot Texas sun, and he was done. And he stuck his head through the window, and there was nothing there except. And so, and every time we do this, we got to lay dolly track all the way across the yard. We got to have 2 scaffoldings up there. One for the one in the beginning. It wound up being 2. But the first one was for Frank the trainer to be on and be away from the little balcony that Benji jumps off into, so that the camera can see him go right out and around the house. And so that scaffolding had to be rebuilt. And oh my gosh, the crew was just they were a lesson in human management, because there was lots of bad morale going on for a while. And what we finally did 7 or 8 weeks down the road is did it in the evening as the sun was setting, but we put Benji in that room up there in the air conditioner totally, I think it was about noon when he went up there and just went to sleep. So he slept for 6 or 7 hours until the sun was actually dropping in the air, all very cool and everything. We erected a second scaffold on which we put an electric skillet with bacon, had a fan right behind the skillet, wafting the smell of that bacon right up under the window.
That's clever. Very clever.
Wow.
And the camera was perfect. The dolly was perfect. Benji popped through the window and immediately sniffed the air.
Wow, fascinating.
Sniffing that bacon.
There's problem solving for you.
But that's, that kind of stuff is what makes all the difference. And that's what I was talking about saying no, is because this was a special kind of movie. It wasn't a movie about people. Most of the Lassie movies and Rin Tin Tins and all that stuff were not, the dog was a prop. The movie was about the kid who has to get rid of the dog because he's eating the chickens, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And your emotion was with the kid, not with the dog.
Yeah.
And this was the other way around from that. And so everything had to be right on. And and we also, Benji his eyes stand probably 12, 14 inches above the ground. And everything, the camera always had to be down to get his perspective, had to be down with him, and that caused all kind of problems. when you have a camera, you also have to have what is called a head on a tripod, usually. And the head is what you pan with and tilt with and give some movement to the camera without it shaking like somebody was holding it. And that we had to invent new equipment to get down there, and we spent the entire summer. That summer, about 12 of us piled around the camera down on the floor, trying to, there's a focus puller there's a camera operator there's a trainer there's a guy with Benji's eye light there's me there, and we're all piled and crammed in because we're doing a very, very close, very real shot. And I learned sometime back in photography that anytime you get a close-up of anything and it's on a telephoto lens, everything gets flattened. And your brain may not be telling you exactly what's going on, but it doesn't feel intimate. Because it just feels close. Because when you're in close with a wide-angle lens, it's like when you're in close with your eyes. You see around things that you don't see around when the camera's across the street with a big, long lens on it. And so the first rule was on all close-ups, we were using a wide-angle lens and being down there with Benji and trying to find a place to put the eye light. And it's just a little sparkle in his eye. If you watch the movie or any photographs that you've ever seen, he's always got those sparkles in his eye because it livens everything up tremendously. Wow. And so he, that's always got to be there. But generally speaking, the light had to do the right reflection. The light had to be right where the camera and where the trainer was, and because the trainer, we wanted the look always to be, very close to the camera lens, not in the camera lens, but very close to it, so that you're getting the full impact of the dog's face and his eyes. But the light's got to be in that spot, but the trainer's got to be in that spot, and I've got to be in that spot because I want to see if it really worked. And so it was like a zoo or a circus actually through the whole entire summer, and things went wrong, and things went wrong, and things went wrong all over the place all the time.
That's life.
And we wound up going several weeks over. I remember there's one scene in the movie that is shot from a cherry picker. It's one of these, like a utility company has. It goes up and works on the power poles, and we had the camera up in the bucket of this cherry picker, and it was in just an old ratty abandoned alley, and the music is just tearing your heart out. And Benji, little bitty in the frame, has just lost his. I mean, he is trying desperately to get this information to some people who have no way to understand what he's about. They just think he's being a pest.
Yeah.
And we know that he knows where these kids are. People always said you got to have a story synopsis in press kit. And I said, no, we're not going to do that, because the story is not about dogs saving kids from kidnappers. The story is about a dog struggling to try to communicate something to a bunch of people he can't communicate with. And he's just been thrown out of the house for doing just that, and he's going around now looking for his friends, trying to find somebody that would see through all of this and get his point. And we're up in this big wide shot, which really is emotional because he's such a little dot in the shot and so small, but his head's down and he's just moping through. And the way Frank got him to do that, the trainer, was he was walking backwards about 40 feet just out of frame, ahead of Benji. And he was screaming at the dog. Huh. Get your head down, shame on you, you bad dog, get your head down.
Huh, wow.
And we were doing a rehearsal, and I turned to the guy who had the control on the bucket, and I said, take me down. I got to go talk to Frank. And so I went down and got out of the bucket and went over to Frank, and Frank says, is that what you want? And I said, yeah, Frank, that's exactly what I want, but I can't bear what you're doing to that dog to get it.
Yeah.
And everybody in town can hear you, by the way. he was very loud. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, you're just destroying that dog to get him to look the way that we want him to look. And he said, you do your job and let me do mine. He called Benji over. And Benji was just sitting there, kind of scratching a flea sort of thing, and just happy as a clam. And he calls over, and Frank said, get that head down. Boy, he dropped the floor like he had just lost his last friend. And he said, okay, and bing, up, wagging his tail, getting a treat, and it was the happiest dog in the world. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Huh, yeah.
He knew that when he talked that way, that's what he was supposed to do, and it was just acting. It was just like doing another trick or something.
Huh, interesting.
And it, I was just blown away. And it took me through a whole thing throughout that movie. I was analyzing, how much reason a dog can show, and can do and can deal with. And we were down in that pile around the camera one day, and I said, okay, cut, print. And for those who don't know, cut, of course, is stopping the camera. Print means we got it. We finally got one. And that means keep it. Don't let it get thrown away. And so when I said cut, everybody started screwing around and waiting for, I said print. And Benji turned around and left and went back to the air conditioner. We had a big tube coming off the air conditioner with a kind of a box sitting on the end of the tube, and that was his place when he wasn't working, because it was like 95 degrees outside, and Dallas as hot as could be, and we can't get the dog to act if his tongue's hanging out from panting.
Yeah.
So we would always take him back and put him in front of the thing. But when I said print, he knew that it was done, and he went back to the air conditioning. And Frank finally got up and said, "Where's my dog? Where's my dog?" And he said, "See, your dog's smarter than you are, Frank. He's back in the air conditioning." He said he knows the difference between cut and print. When he said print, he was gone.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But it is. I did throughout the course of that say no way more than I ever said yes. Because if it's not right, if it's not there, if it's not going to be that magic, then we got to do it again.
Yeah,
we got to do it again, and we got to do it again. And so
one thing, let me say real quick, as a contrast, if people want to watch this movie Army Dog, it's it's not great. It's cute in some ways, but since they didn't say no enough, like there's some scenes in there where supposedly like the dad and the girl are camping, his daughter, and with the dog, and this wolf's coming after him, which wouldn't even happen in real life, I think, because that's the way wolves are. They're not going to come after you like that. It's just relying on some kind of like misunderstandings of biology and a lot of people. But they show this this wolf, and like he's up on a rock, and he's supposed to be a terror. I just want to pet him. His tongue's out. He looks so cute, and they have to even have to have a soundtrack of this, oh. But the wolf's with while that's going on, oh, he's got his tongue out, and it looks so cute. And at one point, I just started laughing. It was just so ludicrous,
Yeah, we had we had a problem in For the Love of Benji, which was the second movie, that it was a situation where a Doberman is after Benji, and Benji has gotten a friend through very clever ways that is a big. It's kind of like a yellow lab, but it was a mixed breed, so it almost bordered on being like a husky or something. But it was a big dog, and so it's a situation where the Doberman is chasing Benji. Benji goes back to a familiar place, high, that jumps down into this tomb in Athens, this ancient Roman tomb in Athens, or Greek tomb, I guess, and goes under this thing, and the Doberman jumps down, and as the Doberman jumps down, comes face to face with that big dog that was under the thing that Benji was going under, and Benji was standing behind the big dog. And the object of this scene is that the big dog says, "Okay, now, bud, what you going to do? I think you should leave." And so the Doberman immediately was like, "Wait, what's going on?" A great expression from the Doberman, which was gotten with a little, these air guns that you dust things with. And, and we just popped him in the face with a little air gun, and he kind of blinked and looked funny, and it was great.
Interesting. Wow.
But the big dog would not get mean without wagging his tail, because it just didn't have any mean bones in his body. And everything that he needed to do to convince that Doberman that he was in control now, he couldn't do. And so as the dog was barking, I began to get up close and look at it, and I saw that his lips actually spread on his gums every time he barked. It kind of moved forward and pulled those lips back, and so you saw gums, you saw teeth and everything, but he was just barking. Meanwhile, his tail was just going crazy. He's having a big time. And so what we did is we put the camera right down the dog's throat, so that he was coming right at the camera with those teeth showing and everything, and it looks like he's about to rip that Doberman's head off, and the Doberman looks behind him, turns, and is gone. And we were doing stuff like that all the time, trying to change, move over to get what had to be there for the whole thing to work. Because like the one you just talked about, once you've laughed at the shot that wasn't supposed to be laughed at, you're gone. You're out of that movie, and you may watch the rest of it, but you're not going to come out of it feeling good about it.
Truth, yeah.
And once you turn loose of that emotion and let it be, a bump that takes you out of the movie, then you don't have them anymore. And it had to be right. Had to be right all the time. So that was an interesting, set of problems. But it's the passion that I started talking about that drove me and a lot of the others on the crew and the trainer through doing what had to be done and accepting it when it wasn't right, and doing it again and figuring it out and changing, doing what we have to do to make the thing actually work.
True.
And that's why I'm so hot on do your passion. Do your passion, because it's going to unleash all kinds of magical things that you don't have if it's just a job.
Yeah.
If it's just something that you don't really want to do, you don't care anything about doing, but you need to make some money, And I think, before we started the podcast, we were talking about Kathleen, my wife, who is a lawyer, is now teaching school because she is making a difference in these kids' lives. They send her letters back. She teaches junior year in a prep school, and And when they get out to college, they're sending letters back saying, I can't tell you how much I hated you when I was there, and I thank you so much.
Yeah,
because
true.
I am now finished with my papers. I've written them, and I'm in bed at 10 o'clock, and all these other people are going to be up until dawn, and I'm going to have the A, and they're going to have the C.
And the A and the sleep.
And it's, you know, it's that kind of thing. And she's doing something that she is now passionate about. And as a lawyer, she really wasn't passionate. She didn't, actually, she never wanted to be a lawyer. She's 25 years in litigation, but she did it, you know, and my second thought to all of that is, you know, no matter what it is that you are doing now, if it's not your passion, you still do it as well as you can possibly do it, because that's what it's important. You know, what is important about, you know, you progressing and getting the opportunity to go do your passion. And so it's, you know, that's the kind of, I think you asked me, you know, about my background.
Yeah.
Got a little off of that track. But,
well, it's important. One thing I want to throw in, there's some important points made in here to like flesh out for other audiences. People might be thinking about the story itself, and sometimes we get carried away in that. But if we think about the principles and the lessons, you know, not everyone has to go to college. Not everyone should. It's like there's all this problem solving, and it's not like, oh, only if you're a scientist you're all smart and do all this stuff or whatever. It's like in making movies and doing it right and doing it well, there's a lot of problem solving and a lot of thinking that is involved, just like Joe talked about. You know, same thing in farming. And then when you're passionate about some of this stuff, then you're going to be more creative and curious. And so you're going to start to make some of these connections instead of, oh, well, I can't do it like what they say, so I'm going to give up. There's that part of needing to be passionate. But you can start doing things better the way like Joel Salatin farms, the way some people are bringing in farming a lot more realms of knowledge instead of just thinking about farming and the chemicals. Well, what about ecology? What about the plants? What about species diversity? What does a plant really need? If we have, some people say nitrogen, but do we need more than just nitrogen? You know, and if people are just complacent and they're not doing it because they don't want to, they're not likely to ask those questions. So the passion thing is important in a lot of different ways. And so when what he's talking about, go ahead.
And to some degree, passion is I mean, you can manufacture it, you know, for a short period of time over something that you don't really have a long-term passion on, but you can generate and find ways to cause yourself to really want to do a good job is what you're doing. And I think that's, you know, that is important. But, you know, my youngest son, wrote and directed the last Benji movie, which came out on Netflix last March, and did a fantastic job. He wrote it, and he directed it, and he's been a A-list writer out there for some time in what I call Hollyweird. He was at Northwestern in above Chicago, and he came home. I think it was he came home for a break of some sort, and he was in his third year, and he said, "I would like to ask you if I can walk away. I know what I want to do. I've got the contacts out there to do it." His older brother is an assistant director, and he had worked on a film in Chicago that his older brother had done the first assistant directing on, and he had met one of the top producers in Hollywood at the time, a guy named Scott Rudin, and he came home and he said, "I know what I want to do, and I know where I'm going to go out and talk to Scott about it." and I think I'm wasting my time and your money.
Mm.
And I said, I'll hold it for a year, and then I'm gonna spend it. So do good your first year, or get back in college. And he went out, and he never looked back.
Hmm.
He has done terrific at, and like I say, he's an A-list writer, and he's a director. He's directed 2 movies now, one with Jennifer Aniston, and I've forgotten the guy's name, but it's called Love Happens, and then this Benji movie, and he's working on another one for Disney right now. And he didn't finish college, and I think you're right. I mean, there are certain things like the medical profession, and certain physics and stuff where
Mm-hmm.
book learning is really important, and going through that process is important. But there's a whole lot of things that as you said, farm all the way through, certainly movies. I mean, I tell people today, save the money. If you're going to go major in film somewhere, save the money. Go to Atlanta or New Orleans, or both of them are big movie centers now, and or if you have to, go to California and get on a production. Get on a
Mm-hmm.
production in the area. Be a production assistant that is basically a gopher, but that's where you start. That's where my oldest one started, and
Cool.
Worked his way up all the way to being first assistant director on major big movies. I think his first big one was Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg, and he's done a lot of these high end special effects kind of movies now, and understands all that. I don't even understand
Yeah.
most of that process. It is really the things that they're doing now that they have to do on the set. And I don't know if you've ever seen the behind the scenes for Jungle Book, where they had one real human in it, the little boy,
Yeah.
and everything else was animated.
Right.
If you see the behind, it's on the Amazon version of Jungle Book.
Mm-hmm.
That is tacked on. The behind the scenes is tacked on to the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you go watch sometime, it is blow your mind.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks.
That
Huh.
kid who was emoting to all of those animals, supposedly, was working in a bare studio. I mean, there was nothing there except the track he was running on, or a limb here, or a thing there, and humans, that he's talking to, or dressed up like a bear or whatever. And it's just absolutely fascinating that it's a great movie. I mean, they really did a super job, and you have, touching and feeling, and he rubs the hair of, a lion or whatever it is, and he actually does it. I mean, it looks like that thing is sitting there right there. And Guardians of the Galaxy is another one, with the rodent that what the heck was he?
The raccoon.
Raccoon. That's what it was. I mean, amazing, absolutely amazing. And of course, he was never there when any of the humans were shooting, and neither was Groot. The tree, and so it's pretty fascinating stuff. And that's the same. Guardians of the Galaxy on Amazon has a behind the scenes at the end of it, and I get as much fun watching that as I do watching the movie, because it's fascinating to me, the kind of things that they're doing and what they have to go through in order to make it and blend it all together, and still, so that it still comes off as the great thing about Guardians of the Galaxy and Jungle Book both is they're both very emotional movies. Mm-hmm. And they grab your emotion right from the beginning, and they don't ever turn it loose. And that's the sign of a great movie. But to put all those pieces together the way they're doing it and still hold on to you is pretty darn tricky, I think.
Yeah, it sounds
Joe,
funny. It'd be like watching at the end some of the outtakes for the Jackie Chan movies.
I know, yeah, at the end they always do.
Yeah.
Calls them the no goods, which we call them outtakes. But Joe, I wanted to mention, your first two Benji movies, you mentioned you had to get the camera down real low so you could get the kind of dog's perspective and everything. And it took a lot of work to get the cameras to do that and everything. But what I thought was really cool is while watching that, especially with my kids, it was almost like it was like down at the kids' eye level, like kids could really relate to Benji and the movie and what was going on because it wasn't that camera up where adults are always at in our perspective. So I thought, I'm so glad that you did that and that you took all that extra work to get the camera to work and be down low like that because it really, I think, made it more accessible to those little viewers, those younger kids.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, I think but it had, you're right. That's probably true, but it had to be there in any case because that's the only way you get inside that dog's head in his heart.
Yeah, right.
And you don't do that, standing off across the room somewhere.
Yeah.
And we had all kind of weird things to do it, and bless the crew because they were coming up with new stuff all the time.
Wow,
the camera
interesting.
was almost never in a normal position on a tripod somewhere. When we shot. Everybody loved it when the time came that, okay, we're going to spend the next 3 hours shooting the people. Oh, yay!
Yeah.
That means everybody could stand up for a while. And it like I say, it was not easy to do. I think we had the first skateboard in the world, only it wasn't used.
Oh, sure.
It was used for a camera. You had a camera sitting on that skateboard when Benji's walking down this hallway trying to sneak in and get back at those people and try to figure out how he could get those people to pay attention to him. And it was both used to shoot him while he was walking and then to turn around and shoot his perspective of walking. And it literally was, with the kind of wheels and everything it had on it, it was probably, the base of it was probably 3 inches max off the ground. Mm-hmm. And then the camera, in that particular instance, there was no head to move it on. We would get it positioned and then go with the skateboard, so to speak. And it was coming up with new stuff every day, all the time, and it was it was exciting things. But the dog is now an international star.
Yeah.
And has made 6 movies, and 4 of them for all y'all who have Netflix. 1, 2, Brandon's movie is on Netflix. The original movie has been remastered in widescreen, high definition. It's gorgeous.
Nice.
The second movie, For the Love of Benji, is on Netflix, and it's been remastered, widescreen and high definition. And Benji Off the Leash, which was the last movie that I did in 2004, is in widescreen and, of course, high definition and so forth. And it's a great movie, too. And so all of those are on. The only one that's not on Netflix right now is Benji the Hunted. And the reason for that is that Disney distributed that movie. We made it like we did all the rest of them as an independent production. But they talked us into letting them distribute the movie. And so they have the distribution rights on it, and so it has to stand apart. You can go to Amazon or Disney or something to see Benji the Hunted. You talk about really asking for trouble.
Yeah.
That movie, Benji the Hunted, there is maybe in the entire movie 5 minutes of humans.
Wow.
All the rest of it is animals. Benji gets lost out in the mountains of Oregon and Washington area. Gets shipwrecked on a fishing trip and winds up making it to shore, and his then gets involved with a handful of cougar cubs and another cougar, because these cubs are without a mom. The mom has been shot and by a hunter, and Benji can't finally resist them asking him to take care of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the story is his quest to get these cubs back into the arms, so to speak, of another mama cougar, and which he ultimately, finally does. But it's all animals. They're bears, they're cougars, they're wolves,
cool,
and dog. And so it was asking for a whole lot of misery. It's a very good movie, actually.
Yeah.
Tell us about your Christmas special one for Benji. That one I saw recently, and that was really fun to see with Ron Moody.
Yeah, that one's on Netflix also.
Yeah.
And it also has been remastered into widescreen. And you know, when these movies were originally digitized for television, there was no such thing as widescreen.
Mm.
And that's something I'm particularly proud of, actually, is that, you know, the original Benji movie is over 40 years old, and it's still out there being watched every day.
Yep.
And so is For the Love of Benji. Yeah, the Christmas thing was a lot of fun working with Ron Moody, because he was Oliver has always been one of my favorite movies, and he was the guy in Oliver, and so to be able to work with him on this was just super. And,
yeah.
It was. I won't say that it was enjoyable, because there's no production that I've ever been on that's been enjoyable. It's funny, you know. Everybody says, "Oh, I want to direct movies." Writing the script is fun. Editing the movie is somewhat fun when you don't run into problems you can't solve. But everything in between is really hard work. And it's not at all necessarily fun, and they're very long days, and it's a good way to crack up, I guess.
Yeah, you got to be, as you say, you got to be passionate about it and have the interest to go through the long term.
Yeah.
Like Baron Heinrich, the biologist, he likes to say, knowing all he does about biology and evolution, he likes to say that some of that is like being a hunter-gatherer from a long time ago. We're still doing the same thing kind of psychologically, and like tracking things and going on the hunt through a long period of time, and similar thing there, having to start out with something and stick with it and go through this long, arduous process to get your final goal of making the movie.
Yeah, and then it doesn't stop there, particularly the way we had to do it, because we were in distribution ourselves.
Right,
for the first several. And that was, I won't say that was fun, because it was really, I was on the road 5 days a week with Frank and the dog, and we were doing promotional tour. We did everything from Spartanburg up to New York. That's the smallest place to the long. We toured over 120 cities and towns with that first movie to get the word out and to get the concept out, as much as anything else, because it was the fact that the dog was actually acting and expressing emotion on the screen. It was a pretty difficult concept to get out, and there were times when that was causing us problems. We opened the movie in Dallas, which is where it had been shot, and we'd had a year to to be talking to the press and getting the concept out and all that kind of stuff. The minute we left Dallas, the reviews went south.
Huh.
The reviews were. We have reviews that never even mentioned there was a dog in the movie.
Huh, wow.
Much less talk about the movie.
Craziness.
The dog. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Fortunately, it was all in fairly small towns. But I finally, came to grips with the fact that the concept is that foreign that nobody had ever seen a movie where the dog was actually the three-dimensional character and the star of the movie. And I can see these movie reviewers in places like Lubbock, Texas and whatnot, going in there with their little sheet. Okay, now how is the acting? How is the story? How's this? How's that? And then filling in the blanks and going back and writing the thing. And so that's where the promotional tour began. We said we got to get out there. We got to get out there ahead of the movie into every market and lay that concept on them. And so we did. In fact, the first, you're from Houston, Michael, and the very first market that we did this with was in Houston.
Wow.
And the Houston Chronicle and Houston Post had both at that time New York type critics down there. They had hired critics out of New York for the paper, and which were scary enough. This is a dog movie, and we're going to subject it to the artsy New York guys. But we asked them for interview, to sit down with us and tell the story. And they said, no, we don't ever do that unless we've seen the movie. And I got on the phone. I said, please, 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 please. We've only got one print right now, this movie. We're a Texas company. We got a movie that people love, and we want you to see it, but I don't have a print that I can send to you to do it. Please do this interview for us. We need this blah, 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 blah. And sure enough, they both said okay.
Cool, good.
And we went to a restaurant in Houston. I do not remember what it was, but it was a nice restaurant. And a big, long table right in the middle of the room. And Benji was at the head of the table, and Frank was on one side, and I was on the other. And then those two guys, and then there were a couple of other newspaper, local, smaller newspapers and whatnot. They're also at the same table. And Frank's a great storyteller, and he did all of Petticoat Junction and Green Acres, all the animals on Beverly Hillbillies, and a lot of ton of movies. He was a big, rotund guy, and always wore a sailor's cap, like a loose guy, a cap with a bill, and had a beard, looked like Santa Claus, and he could mesmerize people for hours, but he had it down. The first thing they say, well, what's your favorite job? And you've trained everything in the world. You've done all these movies and all this stuff. What's your favorite job? He said, this one you're looking at right now. And I'll tell you why. And he'd go into it, and then I'd do it. And we got great reviews in Houston and broke some theater records.
Sweet.
So that started the tour, and we would tour 120 cities ahead of the movie. Always ahead of the movie. And,
smart.
As I said earlier, it wound up being the number 3 movie of the year. The same summer that Jaws was out.
Oh, wow.
Whoa. We didn't have near the number of theaters that Jaws had, but we had the per screen average was as good as Jaws, where we were, and we didn't have the capability to get 1,000 screens. We were working at 400 or 500 screens at a time, and but the trades were all, because Benji was doing so well, they were all talking about it like they were talking about Jaws,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't looking at the whole picture, didn't see the whole picture, but the per screen averages in all the major markets were just fantastic. And so in Detroit, I've never forgotten, and having a scrapbook somewhere, you remember the Jaws artwork, the shark the girl swimming along and the shark coming up.
Mm-hmm.
This was a shark swimming along and a dog coming up to take a bite out of the shark.
Oh, that's
funny. Huh.
I said, would that it was true, but it was. And the other one that I kept forever was the Weekly Variety headline in New York when we finally opened New York. It said Jaws, Benji, Buffalo, and Gotham. And that was very cool. It was quite an experience, and it was fun, and we were all very blessed with the outcome.
Before we leave this, I've got to ask you, Joe, because I'm a music teacher. That's kind of my profession besides homeschooler and everything. But I was curious how you came across the musician, the Yule Box, I think is the name, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Oh.
He was a Dallas local.
Oh.
And several years before we got into this, I was doing television commercials and interested in ones that I saw that were really good and so forth. And there was a commercial for a jeweler in Dallas. There's a park in Dallas called Samuels Park, Tennyson Park, that is 95% azaleas. Everywhere you look, the azaleas are in bloom. It's just a gorgeous park. And they'd gone out and shot in this park, this boy and this girl, obviously about to get married because he's going to give her a ring, and he brushes the azalea blooms off of his hand, and there's the ring, and she, the music that went along with that just made me cry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made, excuse me, I'm crying now.
Yeah.
And I said, so I made a point of finding out who it was that did that music. And when the time came with Benji, I called him.
Cool.
And I had met him since, and we had talked about that commercial and so forth. And I called him, and I said, I want you to come talk to me. And we did, and we talked. And I said, now, there's one particular problem that we have with this. I want the opening theme to be bright and happy, but the down and dirty music, so to speak, where you're really reaching out and squeezing the heartstrings, I want to be the same melody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And that opening piece,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want it to be good enough to get an Academy Award nomination.
Yep. Wow.
He thought I was nuts. He thought I was stark raving mad. But I learned at that point in time to not ever ask God for less than I really want, because that's all I asked for was an Academy Award nomination. And that's what we got.
Sweet.
We won the Golden Globe.
That is cool.
Outright, and beat the one who beat us in the Academy Awards.
Oh, nice.
But but that helped a lot too. That was really important because it kind of validated the movie as a real movie. It's out there.
Yeah.
And we had as we were campaigning for the song to the trades in L.A. and so forth, we said, why not? We're spending the money on advertising and so forth. We also pitched Benji for an acting award because we really wanted to drive that point home that this is what he's doing. This dog is acting just like a human does. And what it did was it started jokes going on national television before the movie ever played in Los Angeles. I mean, it played in Los Angeles, but before it had played the rest of the country. And Johnny Carson was making jokes about Benji and da-da-da-da-da-da. And the point of it, reviewers all over the country were saying things like, this dog deserves an Oscar more than most human actors. stuff like that. And so, that whole thing came out of the the pitch for the Academy Award nomination for the song, and helped us a lot because literally about 80% of the country had not played at that point in time.
Wow, cool. And like when you did the 120 cities, and how many days was that?
The whole summer.
Just in the summer? Whoa! Did you do like 4 cities a day or something? Jeez.
No, it was one a day.
Wow!
But we were out there, 5 days a week, and I would come back to the office every Friday night and be in the office Saturday morning to set new bookings, to set advertising budgets for the bookings that were already on and for the new bookings and all of that, and to look at the figures on Monday morning of what it was doing. And at that time, there wasn't the internet and just to dial up any movie and tell what it's done. They had to be reported in by the theater chains themselves for each market and each theater and where they were.
Wow!
And so I would see the bookings. The numbers, and then I'd head to the airport about noon and pick up the tour as early as I could get there, and maybe get in a radio interview or television, a newspaper interview or something that Monday night, and then that night we'd be on the plane to the next market, and the next market, and the next market. We'd do that, 5 days a week for, from about the middle of May until all the way into September.
And that was across cities on the whole country, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez. Did you when you finished with it, did you just go home and sleep for a month? Jeez.
I don't remember what I did. The problem was that, as things went really well, I remember I was always out in front of the ball, so to speak. If this happened good, that's great. So what's going to happen over here, and what are we going to do with this, and how do we parlay that to this, and I was doing all of that, and we sold licensed the rights in Italy, and they wanted us to come over, the dog and the trainer and myself and Carolyn, and just go to Italy and do the promotion, do the same thing we've been doing around the country in Milano and in Rome. And so we did, and we hit the ground. The flights over, usually you get in the mornings over in Europe, then you travel across the ocean at night, and so you didn't get any sleep. You go to work immediately, and the night, I think the next night we were on a train going down to Rome, and did get some sleep, and got off the train in Rome and walked out into this piazza, and there was a full-blown billboard of our dog.
Nice. Wow.
Nice. Yeah.
That'd make you feel good.
Yeah.
Well, pardon me.
Look, Benji, it's you. Look, Benji, it's you.
But that's the first time that I really stopped long enough to say, holy moly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Here we were 10,000 miles or whatever it is from our little home in Plano, Texas. And there was our dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it did as well over there as it was doing in the U.S.
Sweet.
So.
Nice. Are there any other stories?
The nice part about that was there was nothing I could do because I couldn't speak the language.
Oh yeah.
And so I couldn't complain. I couldn't jump on anybody. We just went around, and Frank would get translated, when he would go out with the dog. But there wasn't any point in me getting into. I did some of the print interviews, but there wasn't any point in me getting on the television because the whole show would have to be translated. Frank and myself. Anyway, it was quite a time.
How long were you there?
It seemed like it was about a week. long enough for me to put on about 8 pounds of weight because I came back and went immediately to Arizona to location scout on a movie that we were going to do next, which was not a Benji movie, and I was huffing and puffing up hills out in the desert and whatnot, saying, "What in the matter is going on?" And I went to get my physical for the insurance for the movie, and I weighed 8 or 10 pounds more than I did before I left for Rome.
Wow. No surprise.
Said, oh my God, that's it.
Jeez,
Good food over there.
The wine and cheese alone will do it. Never mind everything else.
And the gelato too, I suppose.
Yeah, jeez.
It is, but those were good times, and so I don't know where we are. We're still on the first question.
Yeah. Were there any other countries you went to, or just Italy?
No, we went all over. We spent some time in France, because the second movie was shot in Greece, and the Christmas special was made in Zermatt, Switzerland, and we were in the UK for some work on a movie, but Benji couldn't go to the UK because there's a quarantine on dogs, and we shot some shots over there for this particular movie, but it was distant shots with a double dog. We found that in England there wasn't anything close to recognize that you could do it. And that was a movie called Oh Heavenly Dog. And it was, but yeah, we've covered Europe pretty good.
Cool.
With traveling in Japan, we've been to Japan twice with Benji. So, anyway, what's next on the question?
Let's see. Did you have any other problems you had to solve on Benji you'd be willing to share? Anything interesting, like some things that show like the thinking y'all had to do behind the scenes, or